The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couture, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
Yo, everybody, what's up? It's your boy MJ. Welcome to Beats, Vines, and Life. Wait, no.
Hey, everybody, welcome to The Winemakers. We're here on assignment in New Brunswick, New Jersey. I'm in the motherland, MJ.
You are.
I mean, how far did my mom grow up from where we are?
Oh, yeah. Your mom is from Little Silver.
Yeah, Little Silver. Rumson.
And then she lived in Rumson.
Yeah.
So that's 45 miles.
40 minutes away.
It should be 38.
But you're a Jersey.
Right now it's about 70 because of Route 18.
Right.
But, yeah, guys, so, you know, I've done a lot of shit with Sam and the Winemakers Pod. And we have some very special guests. I'm going to let Sam introduce the guests.
New old friends. The restaurant guys. OGs. Go ahead.
Podcast to podcast.
You guys been podcasting since
05 was our first podcast.
Did anybody know what a podcast was in 2005?
We didn't know what a podcast was in 2005. So podcasts were born in May of 05 when Steve Jobs allowed non-native content onto the iTunes store at the time, right?
iTunes store.
But before that, it was only Apple content that was on there.
Right.
We had started a radio show at a local station, WCTC AM, in February of 05. And we had a young person who worked for us who was smarter than we were. And he said, hey, you got all this content. Why don't you just let us put your show up as a podcast? And we said, what's a podcast? And so literally within 10 days...
We still say that sometimes.
But within 10 days of podcasts existing, we had a dozen episodes
We had the
of
number
the
one
Restaurant Guys.
podcast.
Yeah, we did. There were 5, and we were the number 1. Yeah, that was it.
But
can we introduce them?
Yeah, I was going to say, why don't you guys introduce yourselves for all of our listeners?
Mark Pascal, I've owned with this guy Stage Left since 1992, Stage Left Steak now. And Kath Lombardi since 2005. Kath Lombardi is my mother's mother, my grandmother, and food's styled after her Brooklyn Italian kitchen.
And I'm Francis Schott. We have been friends since college, and we bartended together at the same place. And then we got the restaurant bug, and we decided if we were going to do the restaurant business, we were going to own our own. And so we started our Stage Left in 1992. We also have a wine shop. Don't forget stageleftwineshop.com. And we have always been about estate bottled wines from small producers. Well, yeah. You gotta get
fucking pro.
You gotta get the plug in.
We might not actually put this one out. We're just here. This is a university class in how to podcast.
This is a master class for 2 idiots.
Or whatever.
Well,
where were you at school in New Jersey?
Rutgers here, right here in the middle of New Brunswick.
That's where we are. It's spring break though. All the restaurants are closed in town. All the little casual walk around.
Oh,
when
yeah.
you get off the airplane.
Kids are not around.
Kids are gone. That's awesome. So, yeah, what was the radio show? It was the restaurant.
It's called the Restaurant Guys. So this every day.
Same format, interview.
So we'd start
5 days a week.
Yeah, 5 days a week. So we do a little, before the first commercial, 10 minutes. It was just me and him, and we tell some story about what's going on in a restaurant, what's happening. Then we spend about 40 minutes with the guest, and then we do the last 5 minutes of the show and close it out. And so we've kind of kept that format now.
Yeah, we were gluttons for punishment because we were building Catherine Lombardi, our second restaurant. Stage Left was one of the top-rated restaurants in the state. It was great, but we overloaded in management because we wanted to be able to migrate people. We're training people to migrate to the second restaurant. So we were working, basically a part-time job, 40 hours a week for the first time in our lives, right? So we said, well, let's do something that takes 20 hours a week to do. So we get up to our 60. And we thought we would do the radio show while we were building Catherine Lombardi and stop. We wound up doing the radio show, which became a podcast and radio show, and then stopped being a radio show and was only a podcast.
Stop listening to radio.
Well,
people had already stopped. Yeah. To be fair, by 05, we were pretty much done.
But the radio show we were at the radio station 5 days a week from 11 to noon every day. And radio was like real time live. Yeah. And it just was unsustainable after a while. But the podcast,
that's a crazy schedule.
It was crazy. And then go to the restaurants, work until midnight, then go home, read a book for the show the next morning. So it was unsustainable. I mean, we did it for 3 years, so I guess it was sustainable for 3 years, but it was that part of it was really hard.
But you know what was interesting when we took on this radio show, they were like, it won't be much prep at all, because what you're gonna do is you're gonna have a call-in show. And what a call-in show is, I respect it a lot for radio. You would say, listen, come up with 10 questions, 10 random questions, and then just open the phones. So you don't really do any prep. You're like, Mark, what do you think about the Constitution? He's like, I'm against it. I'm for it. Okay, call in. And then you spend an hour just answering. And if that runs out of gas, you ask another question. Right. And you
let people call in and ask questions. But when you have a guest every day, like we did or do still, the call-in would derail whatever conversation.
Right.
So Thomas Keller's on the phone and somebody's asking, how many bottles of champagne should I have for my party on Friday?
Yeah. Right.
And
they're like, I don't know who this Thomas Keller guy is. I have a party Friday.
Well, and so what we did, we decided to do long-form interviews. So that's creating 40 minutes of original content every day, 5 days a week. I mean, it was a full-time job. But it was also awesome. Yeah. Because back then, nobody else had a podcast.
Yeah.
So you could call Thomas Keller. We had Thomas Keller in the show. We had
everybody who was in
Bourdain on the show. Bourdain on the show.
Like big name guests start
from the beginning.
Well, it was a different world back then, and I was just talking to somebody about this afternoon. In 2005, when you wanted to get in touch with Thomas Keller or some other famous chef who was
Trotter
was a working chef, you called the restaurant and you said, "Hey, is Thomas Keller there?" And they said, "Well, let me switch you to the kitchen phone." And you go to the kitchen phone, and then somebody would say, "Okay, what's your name and number?" "Okay, Chef Keller will call you back when he has a chance." And then the next day, 2 days later, "Hi, this is Thomas Keller. I hear you guys have a podcast. I'm interested in being on it." "Great, okay." And it was a very different thing now than going through a publicist and a manager and a day-to-day
because everyone's calling and asking to be on a podcast.
Exactly. There's a million opportunities.
Well, and we did so. Yes, that's all true, but let's not sell ourselves too short, because what we did was we had been running restaurants for 10 years at that point. We had the top restaurant in New Jersey. We're opening another great restaurant in New Jersey, and people kind of knew us because we were all about estate bottled wines from small producers. We were the first restaurant in New Jersey, one of the first restaurants in America to have craft cocktails with Dale DeGroff, right? So our first shows were people we knew. So Dale DeGroff came on to talk about cocktails. Paul Hobbs came on to talk about wine. Somehow we got Charlie Trotter.
This is a Winemakers podcast thing. It's hard because it was a handheld mic.
Yeah.
When you drop big names, we
Francis, you just dropped something.
I'm gonna have a sword.
A name.
So I figured I was gonna be sore by the end of this one.
But here was the strategy, right? So somehow we got Charlie Trotter on the show because we knew somebody. We got those other big names on the show, and then the one question they did ask you was when you called. Give me another big name we had on the show. When you called Bourdain. Bourdain. So,
that's the one thing I want.
Hang that one on the desk.
But here's what happens. You call Bourdain's people, so it's 2005. They don't know you, but they don't know. Nobody knows anybody. There's no Instagram. There's no way to check.
Right.
And they're like, well, who else has been on the show? And you're like, oh, Charlie Trotter's been on the show. Like, oh, okay, then Anthony Bourdain will come on the show.
So truthfully, Charlie Trotter was kind of the first big name guy to come on the show. And so having that in your arsenal of, well, Charlie Trotter was on the show. Don't you want to be on a show that Charlie Trotter was on?
Right. Trotter and Danny Meyer.
Danny Meyer was early on. So and that just builds, right?
2005, 6 was Danny Meyer. I'm in college in Reno, so none of this means anything.
So realize Gramercy Tavern at that time is
and
number one.
And
are literally 1 and 2 in restaurants in Manhattan at that time.
Yeah.
So they were.
It was a big deal.
They were doing okay.
Listen, man. They hadn't gone. He's more than Shake Shack. Okay, that's all side fries.
I read something
else. I had no idea.
I read something that Danny said something like, "I will never open another fine dining restaurant again because of the amount of work it is to run a fine dining restaurant compared to running a Shake Shack and how repeatable something like Shake Shack is." And 11 Madison Park just simply isn't repeatable.
Well,
right?
Even if 11 Madison Park makes you millions, Shake Shack makes you billions.
Right.
God bless them.
There's not an 11 Madison Park in every airport.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that sort of like evolution of the restaurant business a little bit.
Sure.
And first of all, like, you were bartending in college. What made you crazy enough to go, let's, instead of like working at somebody else's restaurant and having a normal life, what like go all in from the get?
Well, first of all, that's total crap because working in somebody else's restaurant is still not a normal life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So I just need to clarify.
Yeah.
So for me, the story is like a lot of restaurant people, right? I graduate college. I have a multiple degrees. I'm a statistic, economics, psychology, triple major. I'm ready to take on the world. I get a job. I'm working as a statistician for an insurance company, and I'm at that desk for 3 days, and I'm like, what am I doing here? And literally, if you include Labor Day weekend, I worked my 8th day. I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this for a living. And I turned in my resignation, and I went back to the restaurant I was still working on weekends. And
So can I have my shifts back?
said, can I please work more? And they said, yes, absolutely.
No restaurateur's ever said no to that.
Exactly.
Well, it was a similar thing for me. I was going to law school. I actually got into Seton Hall Law School, where both of my sisters graduated from.
Didn't have to, right?
Oh, is that-
Seton Hall Law School, there we go.
But I was just like, it's not for me. I like bartending. I thought I still hadn't decided what I wanted to do, and I went and I traveled around Europe for a while, and I came back, and then we were both working at the same place, and there was a little deal where we kind of tried to buy that place, a management buyout with the chef and the general manager and the two of us, and that didn't quite work out, but it made us think, you know what?
It planted the seed.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to do this for ourselves, and so it took us about 2 years until we found a little spot, and we opened a little 50-seat restaurant, and it became the hottest ticket in New Jersey, and now it's 225-seat restaurants and a wine shop with a sidewalk cafe.
It's bigger now.
It's good, and it's been 32 years.
32 years.
Yeah.
How did your parents feel about
Drop
this
out of law school.
divergence of not going to law school? Because my dumb ass, I did go to law school.
Uh,
I went to Rutgers and have never practiced law a day in my life. And you obviously could have had, you could have been CFO of Johnson & Johnson right here in town. And,
I'm CFO of Mark and Francis.
That's significant.
But what was like the parent reaction, to you're going to do what?
Right. You have 3 degrees,
Yeah.
and you're going to law school, and the two of you are going to open a 50-seat restaurant.
All right. So
how did those conversations go?
I think this should say everything about that. So within the last month, okay. Now remember, Kathleen Lombardi is named after my mother's mother.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have named a restaurant after my mom. My mom says to me, I bought you those 5 suits and you never used them. So that's that. I think that expresses the emotion of our parents as we've made that suit.
I have both a Jewish and an Italian grandmother, and if I had worn one of the suits, they'd have gone, "Well, what? You didn't like the other ones?"
I had a similar thing. I remember I dropped the bomb I had already declined law school and said I was going to go find myself in Europe. I found myself. Turns out I was a jerk. I came back home. So
we wanted to send him away.
Look at me. So I'm working as a bartender, and I dropped the bomb. I said it's a Easter dinner, and I said Mark and I are going to try and open a restaurant. Dead silence. I mean, silence. And my family is never silent at the table. But they didn't say anything negative. And my dad was like, well, if you want to give this a try, give this a try. We owned the restaurant.
Hold on. True story.
Yeah.
There's no one who didn't think we were going to fail.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so they were like, okay, open your restaurant.
Yeah.
You don't have any money to lose. It's okay.
So and my dad's like, okay, try this for a couple of years, then you'll go to law school. And I had 3 stars in the New York Times. We were rated like the top American restaurant in Central Jersey, and I was 36, and my dad was like, so when are you going to go to law school? And I think I was like, I don't think I'm going, Dad. I don't think I'm going.
I think that ship is sailing. Sailing out of the New York Harbor.
I think you should go. Honestly, I think you should go.
The statute of limitations was run on that.
I would say though, our families both love our restaurants, and it really
Absolutely.
and our restaurants have provided a real way to come together and a place to come together for both our immediate and our extended families, and and our families know and like each other. That's
more than we like each other.
Yeah, in fact.
And I would want to ask, because I like to go back, but where are each of you from, and what in your childhood, where did you develop a love of food and wine in your childhood that kind of stayed with you and led to going into bars, or
I'll go first because I'm probably more traditional this way.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother's family is Italian American, been here since the 1880s. Lived in Brooklyn her whole life, grew up in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
That food, that culture, Sundays in Brooklyn, hospitality, ingrained that. My father was born in France, French mom. So that French grandmother on that side, very into food, very into cheese. He owned an import-export company, lots of travel. My father was cheap, except for travel experience and food. He spent money on those two things, basically on those two things only, but it was always culinary experience. As a 10-year-old, my mother said, "What do you want me to make you for your birthday?" And I said, "Duck à l'orange." So I was into the food thing from early on.
Got it.
Loved it and ingrained. I did a lot of traveling. I was very fortunate.
I grew up in an Irish family. And the joke that if you've been to the restaurant, you've probably heard me say is that Mark is 3/4 Italian and 1/4 French. He had an Italian grandmother and a French grandmother. Both were excellent cooks. I had 2 Irish grandmothers. One of them didn't cook and the other one shouldn't have. So it did not, was not, now my mom made a good, wholesome, chuck steak dinner once a week. I mean, she made it was good food. We had decent, wholesome food, but my father loved good food, and we'd go out for really great ice cream or really great pizza or there were really great. I grew up in Orange, New Jersey, which was about 1/3 Irish, 1/3 Italian, 1/3 Black, all working class. Everybody was a truck driver, a cop, a fireman, whatever. And there were good Italian restaurants in the town. And I mean, cheap, working man's restaurants. And but I didn't grow up with really great food in my household, but I always loved great food, and I picked up a love of cooking in high school. And then I came to college, and it was always something I was interested in. I worked in supermarkets, and Mark and I became friends when I transferred to Rutgers.
We lived on the same floor.
Okay.
Sophomore year.
Second semester, sophomore year. So I'm like halfway through the year. Nobody knows me, and Mark, of course, is the big fraternity guy. Everybody loves him. He's the center of it. He's the John Belushi character on campus. But I would come home from my night supermarket job, and they would give us the bread that was going to expire that day and the last day of the specialty cheeses. So I'd come home with like a hunk of really good cheese and a loaf of bread under my arm at like 1 o'clock in the morning.
You were French.
And I've been drinking for 5 hours.
And he'd be like, "Hey, new kid." So that's how I was accepted immediately. Anyway, so I had that, and then I started working in restaurants. And I loved it. I mean, I loved David Drake was the chef at
really
Frog and the Peach,
guy.
Which was was a pioneering restaurant, opened in '83 here in New Brunswick. Jim Black and Betsy Alger owned it. We both wound up working there eventually, but David Drake was the chef de cuisine at the time. He allowed me to stand in the kitchen. I just got hired as a bartender, and I was like, "What is this food? I've never seen anything like this before." And I totally got the bug.
So is the sort of like basic breakdown of you guys in the restaurant is your front of house and your back of house?
We're both front of house.
Both front of house
We're
guys.
both trained front of house.
Okay.
We've always had chefs. Now, very fortunate for us. The chef of Stage Left has been with us now for 17, 18 years, and the chef at Lombardi has been close to 20. So we're fortunate that we've had that kind of stability.
How did you do that? Because that's not really
well
common for this industry. It's turnover, and people seeking new opportunities. How did you able to cultivate that culture?
Well, to be fair, the first 10 years, we had 12 different chefs.
Wow.
Okay, so you're just you get that, right, and you get people turning. Then we had a guy by the name of Patrick Yves Pierre Jerome, and he owned a restaurant called Yves originally in Montclair, and he came and he kind of stabilized that position. He was there for about 4 years. He stabilized that position. Then another guy by the name of Anthony Bucco was there for about 4 years. And those two guys really helped us, like I said, stabilize that position. And then, Fernando's been with us for 28 now.
Years. He's our
28 years. So if you've had a grilled steak or burger at Stage Left for the last 28 years, chances are Fernando cooked it. So they really stabilized the rest of the kitchen guys. And honestly, for a chef, the job gets a lot easier when all the guys around you are staying.
Right.
So that was the first part of it. The first part of it was the second and third level guys were rock solid. And then there's more, reason to stay.
And, Mark and I, we have these two restaurants that are in the same building and the wine shop that's in the same building. We're really dedicated.
It's a really cool looking building, by the way.
It is 100 years old this year.
Oh, wow.
2025.
Just turned 100. We had a birthday party for it earlier
stands
this
out
year.
for sure. It's cool.
And you see it at night when we light it up. It's gorgeous. You'll see it.
You will see it at night.
Oh, yeah.
Just
a couple hours here.
Here's a plug. We're doing this from the Heldridge Hotel, which is the hotel right across the street. New Brunswick is a wonderful town. We should talk about New Brunswick at some point. Because hopefully we have helped make New Brunswick a better place, but because of New Brunswick, it has helped us to become what we are. But, it's all about long-term relationships, and probably what would have been made more economic sense, even in the restaurant business, was for us to open 4 or 5 places. Take a place, open it, run it, sell it.
For sure, financially, open 8 or 10 Cafe Lombardis, especially because more repeatable, I think, than Stage Left.
Sure.
And we may open some other Cafe Lombardis in the future, but we decided to make a career here. And we provided this stable platform, and the most valuable relationships to us are long-term relationships, whether that's regular customers, whether that's our front of house people,
or my wife.
But
good answer. Yeah. Good answer.
But they're really
she's sitting in the corner of the room, in case you're wondering at home.
Smiling, by the way, not scowling.
She's taking notes though. She's got a list.
You're always taking notes.
But the two things that happen are you find people who value long-term relationships as well. And then over time, everybody knows that we've got their back. It's very high standards. And if you can't come in and screw up my business, and you have to contribute something. But if you fall on hard times and you're a long-term employee of ours, we have your back. If you get sick, we've bailed people out of jail, which are some funny stories behind that.
People getting arrested?
We've never had to be bailed out of jail ourselves, but we have, and people see how you treat other people. And if you have, the more long-term relationships like that you can get, the better it can be.
I mean, frankly, Francis and I have a lot of the same friends that I had when I was 10 years old. Okay. Mm-hmm. Francis is still considered the new guy in our friend group because he came on at 19, right? So almost 40 years ago, he came onto the scene, and if there's an event going on, I'm like, sorry, you're the new guy. If one of us has to work and one of us has to stay, I'm going. You're staying.
Well, let's big up New Brunswick a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
This is my first time here. Tell me what I should be looking for when I'm walking around tomorrow. Down. Is the rivers over there, or that
we haven't really developed our river. We have a little park on the riverfront, but Raritan is the Raritan is not. We haven't really developed the Raritan as part of the city. That wasn't how it happened. Right. Well, this is one of the oldest cities in the country. George Washington had his army here. The first 4th of July celebration in the country was in New Brunswick, New Jersey, in the 4th of July, 1777. Wow.
Queen's College.
Queen's College.
First chartered college by the Queen of England in 1766.
In New Brunswick.
And that became Rutgers.
Okay.
So New Brunswick, by the time in the 1960s into the 70s, New Brunswick suffered the same malaise as every northeastern post-industrial regional capital. The industry had left, crime was on the rise, housing stock was tired, and the infrastructure was falling apart. And there was, in the late 70s into the early 80s, there was a real concerted effort. Johnson & Johnson was the financial anchor. It's a Fortune 50 company. We're their world headquarters. And they basically delivered New Brunswick an ultimatum. We're either going to move to Virginia, we'll move this world, and we'll be the last, we'll close the door on the way out, and we'll turn the lights off, or you clean up your politics and figure out a way to, and work, and we'll dump a ton of money and time and resources into this town, But it can't be corrupt, and you got to figure out how to do it.
Sam
right.
doesn't understand New Jersey politics.
Oh, yeah.
My political experience is
these guys.
this twisted in the way in Nevada. And
Mendez is a chump because he's in jail. These guys didn't even go to jail, bro.
And what
I mean, you've seen The Sopranos.
That's all true, by the way. We went to high school with those guys.
Well, true-ish.
But here's
Based on the true story.
right. This is a video podcast. It might be true.
Allegedly.
I heard.
Well,
It's allegedly true.
that's our favorite word in New Jersey. Allegedly.
It really is.
No,
The
but
state motto, New Jersey.
As the police siren.
Allegedly.
As the police siren.
Right,
Right.
exactly. Wait, New Jersey and you, perfect together. Allegedly.
But here's what happened in New Brunswick. So you had a number of different corporations from. One of them is a corporation called DevCo, which was a first of its kind public-private partnership to redevelop New Brunswick. They've done over $4 billion worth of building in this city of 60,000 over the last 20 years with a B. And we've had the same mayor for 35 plus years. Mayor Jim Cahill's amazing.
Amazing.
And,
great leadership.
Good for business.
That's been the key, honestly.
Clean, honest.
Leadership of the town.
And you've seen this hotel get built where there once was an abandoned old hotel. You see all sorts of new building. And the interesting thing about New Brunswick was it was redeveloped in a way that, like, I saw a lot. I studied politics and urban politics in school. And you see a lot of cities that redevelop by basically kicking all the people who live there out, poor and working class.
Long Branch, New Jersey, where I'm from.
Okay. And I'm making no comment on that. But yeah, but kicking out all the poor people, bringing in new people, building new buildings and saying, hey, we redeveloped the city.
Yeah.
Right, here's $2 million condo for you.
Exactly.
You tore the old one down and built a new one. You didn't redevelop the city.
Right.
What we did in New Brunswick was when they tore down the housing projects, which I remember the day they dynamited them, they spent the 10 years prior making sure that in every new development had secretly 1-for-1 housing, 1-for-1 replacement reserved every single person in that project.
Secretly was the key because people come out of fucking woodwork.
Oh yeah.
When you say affordable housing, it's like in New Jersey. I mean that lawsuit, that's Mount Laurel.
Right.
Mount
And they still don't comply with that shit.
But what they did in New Brunswick was they had this plan for scattered site housing. They told every developer, if you want to build something new in New Brunswick, you have to set aside this amount for low income housing, affordable housing. And what they did was they took the old projects which weren't working, they were architecturally terrible, and they replaced 1-for-1 each of those units. Yeah. And the redevelopment, and we've been happy to be a part of it, was finding jobs for the people who live here, keeping the people who live here empowered, staying in touch with the communities that live here. And because of that, we have a strong social fabric throughout New Brunswick. It's not just the business community.
And one that's been here for a long time.
Yeah.
The Hungarian community has been here a long time. It's still here. It's still thriving.
The Mexican community, we embraced the immigrants who came in the 70s and 80s to the point where we have a Mexican consulate in New Brunswick. The consul of Mexico is here in New Brunswick. That was in the last couple of years because there's such a strong, important Mexican community that is first generation and Mexican immigrants here.
And second generation.
So this is a place on the East Coast where I can get a decent taco.
Oh, yeah, it is.
When I come out, I love New York. It's been better lately, but in the beginning of my selling wine on the road life, the first thing I'd have to do when I get back to California is have a real taco.
Two cities.
Well, the only thing I'm going to say to that is realize you have a 12-month growing season, and we have, we have a 5-month growing season.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
extraordinary. So the town is great, and the thing about this town is they did their redevelopment based very heavily on the arts and education and hospitals, and then the private businesses grew up around that, which is we're happy to be a part of it.
Yeah,
happy to be a part of it.
Seems like a sustainable way of doing it.
Seems to be working out for New Brunswick.
Yeah, they worked on Center City, and they've kind of built their way out.
So let's pivot back to your podcast. You guys come out the gate, and you're able to score great guests. How long did you do? Because I know you went on hiatus for a while. How long did you go, and then what prompted you to come back?
So we did live radio 2005 to 2008.
Okay.
During that time,
3 years of 5 day a week.
5-day week. Well, by the end, we're doing a rerun or something once a week. But yeah, 4 days a week, certainly. So 3 years of that, then just simply, we talked about sustainability, not sustainable to continue to do that. So in 2008, we went to a once a week podcast. We did that through 13. And then we just said, you know what? It wasn't, there was no way to make money on it in 2013, right? It was not a sustainable part of our business.
Yeah.
Mark had 4 kids and they were teenagers.
Yeah, I had 4 kids. They were growing up. I want to coach football. I want to, do those kinds of things. And so we just stopped. And then kind of during COVID, right, we had more time to talk about things. And I would say that's where it was born again. The idea of it was born again. And then this past July, we rebooted it and said, let's go. We had a couple of nice corporate sponsors that came aboard. And
that helps.
We're on our way.
See, that's what happens when you are in the community and you build up. And I mean, like I was going to say, as an independent podcaster, it's still hard to make money.
Yeah, of course.
It's not,
one of the things we and here's a plea to everyone, if you want to come to our show, we have paid subscribers. So you can always follow us, get most of our content for free. But we have paid subscribers who get additional content, who get invited to special things. But our corporate sponsors sponsored us enough that we could pay the bills of doing the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
And by that,
that's all me and Sammy are looking for.
Because
somebody else to plug the microphones in every once in a while.
Well, the work that goes into the podcast. Well, Mark's wife is basically full time on the podcast, and she works 40 hours a week editing, setting up guests, and we have other employees. Julie, who operates our restaurants, also helps us. We have paid researchers who make sure that we're prepared when we go in, and our corporate sponsors basically cover those costs. And then our paid subscribers, kind of make it worthwhile to do, and that we're kind of growing as we grow, and that's an interesting way to make things happen.
And we've just added, just in the last couple months, so New Brunswick Performing Arts Center is right next door to us, and they've invited us to do a culinary series with 4 live shows, which
awesome.
We've just
promoting the heck out of all over town.
Nice.
It's hard to avoid the little restaurant guys.
Excellent.
These guys they're like Max. We walked into the hub, like, hey, like the whole staff. There's a freaking poster. I didn't even notice the poster, you guys, when I came in first. I'm like, damn, man.
Well, it's I will say that the hotel we're sitting in is one of the sponsors of the Restaurant Guys podcast. So it's a mutually...
Big up to the Heldrick. So if you're looking to sponsor any other podcast.
So hold on a second. I need to take a small break. So when coming to New Brunswick, the Heldrick Hotel. The other thing that we discovered, which was first of all, the live shows. Have you heard of a podcast that's basically 6 months old for the new one? 4 live shows, a 400-seat theater in a paid ticketed event with Rocco DiSpirito, Alex Guarnaschelli, Andrew Zimmern, and
Scott Conan.
I mean, that's crazy, right? And we just got an inquiry from, I can't give you the details. We're probably going to do a live show or 2 in Belfast in Ireland.
Oh, wow.
So we'll be international soon. It'll be amazing. But the live shows are amazing. One of the things that's really different about our podcast, just listening to it though, we said, okay, let's resurrect the podcast. Let's listen to the old podcast and see how we are. We realized we had almost 500 shows.
Of old shows.
Wow. And 350 of them were evergreen. They're like, this is cool. Mm-hmm. So every Tuesday is a new show. And every Thursday is one of the shows from our archives. And then every other Saturday is a bonus show for the...
so you guys drop 3 episodes a week?
2 episodes, 2.5.
2.5?
2.5.
So, but realize,
it does sound like a full-time job.
Full-time job. One of the things that happened was the guests that were on our show, okay, frankly, some of them are dead.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, you had Charlie Trotter and Anthony Bourdain. Yeah. There's some of them just simply passed away. But most of the rest of them were successful then. So 20 years later, they're still successful, right? There's stories. So we interviewed a woman today about caviar. It's a woman we talked to.
Deborah Keene.
Deborah Keene talked to her about caviar 20 years ago. And
when she had the first farmed caviar in California.
So today we talked about the evolution of...
Sorry, Nikolai. That was her company.
We talked about the evolution of American caviar over the last 20 years was the subject of today's show. So now you can listen to the old show with Deborah Keene from 20 years ago, which is fascinating. And she begins the whole farmed United States, California caviar revolution. And now 20 years later with where it's gone to
and now
fascinating.
She has the first patent on no-kill caviar, which will be released in the fall.
Yeah. So that's Deborah.
And on the show today, we're like, we agreed. She agreed that she's going to do the launch. The East Coast launch is going to be at Stage Left in September.
If September wasn't so busy for me,
it might be a little bit.
What are you doing in September? I don't know. What do you got to do?
In my Thanksgiving vacation. Well, and actually, I was going to ask about this, just sort of in general, of like from when you opened Stage Left to now, sort of like the evolution of food culture, both across the country, but locally. There's so much more emphasis now on farm to table and locally produced, and watching that sort of transform in your dining room must have been great.
Francis is going to talk a little bit about our philosophies in 1992 were forward thinking, right? That's I consider them forward thinking because here we are in the forward.
Right.
And everybody's thinking the way we were in 1992.
We opened in 92 and we said we were going to be seasonal. We were going to be driven by local farms. We were the first people to put the names of farms on the restaurant, to have relationships with local farmers. We were estate bottled wines from small producers. I used to say that no one knew what the hell I was talking about. We were the only ones.
Right. Nobody knew what an estate bottled wine from a small.
They never knew why it mattered or any of that.
And was that both domestic and
Oh, yeah.
No, that's because it's New Jersey.
No, but I mean,
I'm kidding.
No, we were.
I kid.
California wine here too.
So we dealt early with Jake, our mutual friend. Jake was working for Michael Skurnick at the time. So we were buying wines from, and if people outside the business might not know these names, but back in '92, we were buying wines.
Michael Skurnick.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we bought wines primarily from.
Shout out Harmon. Harmon's my guy.
The Skurnick, yeah, absolutely Harmon. So Skurnick wines back in '92. We were the first New Jersey restaurant customer of Skurnick wines.
Yes, you were.
We were the first New Jersey restaurant customer of Rosenthal wines.
Oh wow!
We bought from Bobby Catcher, who a lot of clinging. But
big cling episode.
But the thing is, it was a real challenge back then because people would walk in and say, "Where's the Opus wine?" I was like, well, "I don't know Opus." I'm like, "Oh, this restaurant must suck."
Right.
Oh, you can't. You can't get it.
Oh, you can't. Yeah.
Oh, you can't get Mondavi Reserve. You can't. Is that why you don't have it?
And they're like, "Well, you don't have any of the steakhouse wines." I'm like, why do you want me to have the same wines as everyone else? Now people understand that. Right. People understand that you go to a restaurant because that restaurant has a point of view and has made a selection, and there are plenty of restaurants that have the standard wines, and that's good too. But back then, we had people who said, we had a lot of people who were open to education. New Brunswick deserves a lot of credit for all the people who kept us alive and supported us, but there was a lot of pushback to, what do you mean? I don't want to see any names that I don't recognize when I look at a wine list. And we were all, oh, you want Alban Viognier? Who's Alban and what's Viognier? And
shout out to
John Alban.
But but it worked solely to our advantage because there'd be all of those importers that I talked about. They got an allocation for New York, and they get 10 cases for all of New York, and they get 1 case for New Jersey. Difference was you had 25 of the coolest sommeliers in America fighting for those 10 cases in New York. Nobody in New Jersey gave a shit but us. Yeah. So we got everything. Right. Right. We got Turley, we got Markison, we got and then people caught on later.
Bing.
Sorry.
We'll add those in post.
But it wasn't about scores. It was about, but then as everybody came in later, we had established those relationships. Right. Kathy Corson was a friend. Paul Hobbs was a friend. No dinging. Okay.
No. We just had Kathy on our show. We'll be out on Friday.
Amazing. So, but the thing, it wasn't score hunting. It was these were individuals who were farming land and making wine with a point of view, and that's what we cared about. And we had
and also we also had a point of view, right? And it was different than some other restaurants. And some other restaurants were looking for big, juicy, very fruit forward wines, and famous high score, and that's the only things you would see on their list. And our point of view was a little different. Yeah. Okay, and we wanted our wines to speak of where they came from. We wanted our wines to, it was just at that time, a different philosophy. Like I said, why I know it was forward thinking, because here we are and everybody's saying all those things that we were saying 30 years ago.
How long did it take for that tide to sort of shift?
It's past 2000, certainly. Because I would say 05 people. Now listen, our customers caught on pretty quickly.
Right.
They're like, wow, this is great, and I can spend 60 cents on the dollar and get these cool wines that that I love, that was a great, that sold for us. So that helped us build our own reputation with our clientele.
Do you know who was a great guy who helped us build our reputation, which was an interesting story, is when Paul Hobbs first came out. We were the first restaurant outside of California to sell Paul Hobbs wines. He happened to be at the wine boat tasting at the Puck Building in New York City. And a friend of mine brought me over and said, try these wines.
You're going to need like wind chimes or something.
Yeah, so he
There's going to be background music piped in, just ding, 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 ding.
He had a Chard, a Pinot, and a Cab.
No, Chard and Cab only at that time.
Oh, Chard and Cab only at that. And they were in shiners. They were not even labeled. He just said, I'll go check. So it was the 91s that he was showing. And I remember I put my nose in the glass and I was like, who are you? You know what I mean? I was like, this is
That's not
crazy.
What he said.
What did I say?
You said, who the fuck are you?
That's it. That's what I said. Checks out.
Who the fuck are you?
Checks out.
And he was like, oh, Paul Hobbs, super nice guy, right? Originally from the East Coast, but California nice. And I was like, I gotta have these wines. And I'm a pushy 27-year-old. And I was like, I gotta have these wines. He's like, well, I wasn't gonna release them until the spring. I'm like, please send 5 cases of each to me. He's like, well, they're not ready. I'm like, I'll explain to everybody that they're not ready so he sent them, and we sold a ton package because we have a special license. Our license in New Jersey allows us to sell in the restaurant as well. It's called a Broad C. It allows us to sell package as well. And so we did the first Paul Hobbs dinner in 1993.
Yeah.
And we became fast friends ever since. But the critics Parker initially did not take to Paul Hobbs. He was giving him wines that were not as highly rated as they eventually became. And we were like...
He was getting lots of 87s, 88s, 89s.
Well, and in those days...
Well, those are real scores.
Well, and they were real scores, but but it was Parker or nothing.
Exactly.
Yes.
And
Exactly
we were literally we're in our little 50-seat restaurant. We were the bartender and the maitre. We were like, Parker's wrong on this one. He's wrong. He's wrong. He's wrong. He's wrong.
Right.
And we did a couple of dinners over a couple of years. We sold a lot of people, had a lot of Paul Hobbs in their cellar. And then Parker started rating them better. And then he went back and re-rated the early ones. He said, I was wrong. These wines are great.
When Parker said he was wrong, he was basically saying Mark and Francis were right.
Yeah. And a lot of our guests who were into that, who were like, all right, it's not a high score. It'll buy from you anyway. All of a sudden, they're like, you were right. I'm a genius. Like, yes,
You're a genius. You have some in your cellar. You're a genius.
That's it. So
For sure.
he was important to us.
And now we've had that dinner for 33 years in a row. We've done 30. It is the longest running wine dinner with the same winemaker, same restaurant in the country.
That doesn't surprise me.
I mean,
at all, man.
the fact that it's also that Paul Hobbs has been the owner and winemaker for 33 years and hasn't, sold out or, it's an impressive run.
That the owner of the winery is the same is special. The owner of the restaurant is
totally
special.
Yeah.
And we've been doing this since 93.
Yeah, that's
a fun time.
a Venn diagram that doesn't usually intersect.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I know, we've been talking a little bit before, and when I tasted with you, Francis, a couple months ago, but it's not necessarily the cheeriest wine and restaurant marketplace out in the world right now. But what are
it's not necessarily the cheeriest marketplace.
Right, period.
Right.
But are you seeing bright spots? Are you seeing like interesting things and trends with wines that are selling that are sort of surprising you, or going back to things that weren't popular and coming back? Let's mine for the good news.
All right, let's go to the bad news first.
Okay.
Chardonnay is gone.
Yeah, I can't.
I sell some Chardonnay by the glass. I would say I sell 1 or 2 bottles of Chardonnay a week in the restaurants.
In the 2 restaurants.
In the 2 restaurants, right? Total.
250 seats.
Total.
2 bottles of Chardonnay a week.
2 bottles of Chardonnay. I mean, like I said, I sell by the glass. I sell more.
Now, since we've become a steakhouse,
Right.
that's skewed us a little
That's
bit.
part of
in
it.
one of the restaurants. Part of it.
And Chardonnay and Italian food is not exactly, made in heaven either. But
Tell the Antinori family. They make the Batard Montrachet of Italy, according to James Sutton.
Can't argue with that.
Sorry, James.
but that's just it's gone. It is gone. People are drinking other, frankly, I think usually more interesting, not always, there's some great Chardonnays in the world, some Batard Montrachets. But people are going and venturing into different parts of the world for different types of grapes. So you said, look for a bright spot. people are looking for the interesting. They're looking for the off the beaten path. They're looking for, show me something that maybe has a little more value that I've never heard of before. And it doesn't have to be inexpensive, but a little more value per dollar and something I haven't seen before. So
it's like spurring some more exploration.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, look, it's an economic downturn. There's no question that pot has the legalization of pot throughout the country in New Jersey.
There's like 3 dispensaries that I walked past down the street. I
Yeah.
somehow didn't go into any of them, which is really the miracle for any listeners at home.
Since we're doing a wine tasting later, I'm a little bit grateful.
But the thing about it is,
I have to be on brand though, Mark. You guys are in shirts and jackets. I'm going to be wearing a tie-dye for the tasting, just so you know.
dude, you're a winemaker. You're allowed to do any of that.
Exactly.
Right? You know? First of all,
That's right. I'm hoping there's dirt on your boots.
Right, exactly.
I left the dirty boots at home. I packed clean shoes in my bag.
Here's the hierarchy, right? The banker has to wear a blue suit to work. I can wear crazy colors, and we can wear crazy colors in our jacket and tie. And you can wear whatever the hell you want. You're a farmer. That's what people want.
That's why this is the only job I can do.
I remember one Italian. I got a side story. I remember one Italian importer, and you'll know who I'm talking about, who used to have a slight Italian accent, though he spent a lot of time growing up in New York. But he affected his Italian accent even more, and he would always wear like a bandana tied around his neck as if he had just come off the field. I'm like, you're staying at the Ritz. You know? Oh, but it is so important to have the. I'm like, and you were at high school in Long Island.
You had Eggs Benedict. And you went to
high school in Long Island. And you went to high school on Long Island. You know. Anyway, but so here's the spot, right? Marijuana is eating our lunch to some of an extent, right? And Ozempic is eating our lunch to another extent.
Right.
Both of those things are new and fads, and people are embracing them right now. And it's like when a new restaurant opens in town next to us, we're always happy to see it. Always hurts our business a little bit for a couple of weeks. Everybody's going to check it out
for a little period.
And then, but then we're better for there being another great restaurant in town if it's great, and if it sucks, it goes away, and who cares? We've been selling wine. Okay, it's in the Bible, right? Jesus was a winemaker, okay? So we're going to be fine.
I guess we can ding Jesus, too.
Yeah.
I think, you know.
So, all right. So we're going to be fine. The wine industry is going to be fine. There is an interest in wine. Marijuana, pot, THC, it's a way to go home and you have a gummy and you play video games, and that's fine. And you don't go out for 2 or 3 drinks and happy hour and meet other people. But after a certain period of time, THC is a solitary thing that makes you temporarily content to be alone. But your social network's going to fall apart, okay? Wine is convivial and communal, okay? Going out for a drink at the bar, you have to go out and drink. And eventually, I think that's going to swing back the other way because part of wine is coming together. Part of wine is sharing a bottle of wine, having some drinks with friends. And they're saying that young people, they're finding out more and more. I read a study recently that says that people who use pot now, instead of going to happy hour, they're using pot Monday through Thursday.
They're using it wrong, is what Sam.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what Sam's thinking.
I'm with you.
You're doing it wrong.
I'm with you. But people use
You're supposed to pass it around, right? That's what.
But especially the specialized marijuana, people using it to sleep, people using it to calm. And you're like, it that can only last so long. People need each other, and when they need each other, the bar's going to be here. Wine's going to be here. Cocktail's going to be here because we're convivial. And they're saying already that people are tending not to use it on Friday and Saturday nights. Young people are not using it on Friday and Saturday nights because it makes them less social. And that's the last thing we need. So I have hope. Everyone's fascinated with pot. Everyone's fascinated with the GLP-1s. And that will balance out in the end. And I've been selling wine for 3,000 years. It's not.
Well, we haven't been selling.
We as a human race have been selling wine.
Our genealogy has been selling wine.
Do you think that part of that, it was what's that perfect storm of, we had COVID, you had legalization was falling all around the country, so people were home anyway.
Yeah.
And restaurant, obviously restaurants took a hit. How are you seeing people coming back? Like, what was it like coming back out of COVID for you guys? Like, and how did you storm COVID?
So what's interesting there is So 2023 was our best year ever by far. It was this big blowout, spectacular year. And then 24 kind of went back to a normal year, but all the expenses were higher. Right. So everything cost more, labor cost more, products cost more, everything cost more. Even gas and electric cost more. So
let me just say that your wine producers were feeling the exact same thing in 23 and 24.
Your bottles cost more, your labels cost more. We get it. Your people to pay cost more.
There's more reasons than that. But
it's expensive. I know you're eco-conscious, but it's expensive.
But so 2024 was kind of this weird, not great year. And then 2025, everything kind of came back in January, February. And then somebody uttered the word tariff the first week of March. And you can see business we're sailing along. We're getting back up to those 2023 levels, and you just see it go like that.
Literally, like somebody turned off a spigot
in a minute.
I have a friend who works on a winery. They pressed go on their wine club the day that the April 7th, the Liberation, whatever the fuck that means, Liberation Day, liberating us from our 401ks. They pressed go on their like giant wine club on April 7th, and it was like it was a bloodbath. Yeah. Everybody was calling and canceling and just like freaking out.
The thing about restaurants, I think it was Toast that published some figures that said that restaurant receipts went down. Don't quote me on the numbers, 20% or something in 1 month, year over year in March. I believe that happened. Here's what didn't happen. Okay, it's not like all of a sudden everybody got fired and nobody had enough money to go out to dinner. Okay, that didn't happen. Right. What happened was people panicked and they said, "Hold on a second, I'm paralyzed. I don't look at what happened to my 401k. Let's not go out to dinner," and that is a psychological effect at this point. So I don't know what's going to happen to the economy going forward, but nobody does, and that's why they're scared. But it's not that people don't have enough money to go out to dinner. That the fundamentals of the market haven't changed. It's a panic, and that can be very temporary. And people are trying to find a rebalance. And I think one of the things that happened was people drank their faces off during COVID because what the hell else was there to do? And then they were thrilled to be back out in public, and maybe they went a little too
travel and do all those things.
There was a natural pullback, and the economy contracted, and there's tariffs, and so we're in a bit of a valley. But I don't think the fundamentals have changed.
Here's what I'll say as the guy who really studies the numbers of our business.
You're saying Francis doesn't do any of that shit.
I was the English major. Okay.
I'm saying Francis doesn't do any of that shit. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
I do. I say, Mark, what's going on? Tell me about the numbers.
He quotes the magazines, and then I tell you what the actual
that is 100% true.
But what I'll tell you is, even as early as next week, because we're kind of a fine dining restaurant that does a lot of advanced booking, does a lot of things where we can kind of see in the future. The advanced bookings for May look more like February than they do March and April. So I think you're already seeing people tire of bad news. Yeah. Bad news, lack of participation.
What everybody wants to know is, how is this going to affect me? Am I going to lose my job? Is my 401k going to go to 20% of its value? And so people hit the pause button. But two things happen. One is, you start to get more confident when you see the world hasn't totally exploded, and you get thirsty. Right. You know what I mean? You hit the pause button for a while, you're like, I need to go out for a drink.
And there's something to be said about just like in the first administration of this guy who did the tariffs, whatever his name is. I think people drank more. That was what we saw. I think it was like, what you get home, there's terrible news. You're going to, now maybe it's a gummy, but I think it's a gummy and a glass of wine. That's how I'm dealing with it.
Like Francis was talking about, I think that 2023 being the anomalous year, let's look at that as the anomalous year. You got a lot of people addicted to their phones. The people who really are, there's this faction of people who really are antisocial, don't want to be social human beings. It became accepted for them to do that. They didn't have to go to work. You don't have to do a lot of things. So there's a portion, a cadre of the population that I think is embracing not going out. Mm-hmm. But most of the people that we know and we talk about are at the very worst on the fringe of that, but most of them are outside of that and do want to go back out and will want to be with other people and will want to be sharing cocktails at the bar. The other thing we've noticed is people prefer it. Like if we're going to have a slow night, if we close one of the rooms and put people closer together than if we spread everybody out over the giant dining room.
Yeah, people want to be together. People want to be in a room.
People want to be
feel
in
the energy
in an energetic place.
Yeah. And tonight we're going to have the wine tasting we're doing with you,
which I'm stoked about.
With your wonderful wines.
Yeah, thank you.
And this is bringing new things to people.
Ding myself on my own show.
We got to ding. We got to ding your dad, man.
Ding Phil Kateri.
All right, there we go. They're singing all around.
These are nice glasses you guys have in your
They really
restaurant too.
Jancis Robinson glasses.
By the way, tell people
Thing.
about what we are drinking here, man.
Yeah, tell us.
Well, I think
poured.
this might be one of the first in the wild placements of this wine. This is a new label from us. I haven't even talked about it on the show much. Enrico Valentine.
That's my show. I get
Right.
this.
This is for the beats and wines. Totally.
You have a podcast.
Yeah, but too busy selling other people's shit. I don't know. So this is our 16600 was always a single vineyard wines, things that we've farmed. Trying to focus on that sense of place. And the same sort of weirdness of the world, 23 and 24. We had lots of extra grapes, some stuff that wasn't sold, and we didn't want it to hit the floor, rot on the vine. So we brought it in. We brought in a ton of Zinfandel, a ton of Grenache, and want to make something Grenache. That's really what we're here for. And prior to that, every vintage, Isabelle Gassier, ding that one. Isabelle Gassier from Domaine Gassier, worked with my dad in the vineyards for a few years as our consulting winemaker. Every time she would come and do a blending session, we'd put her in the lab. She'd come out 3 days later, her hair's all over the place. And she would present something to me that was a Grenache Zinfandel blend. And every time I'd be like, I love this, but I don't have a place for it. It doesn't fit in any of the, 16600 brand. And so when she did it this year,
how did that not fit your brand, Sam?
It just, because we didn't, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I couldn't wrap my head around how we're going to sell a Zin Grenache blend. But
thank you for the ding.
There we go.
Isabel's also hanging out. That project she was hanging out with Philippe,
right? In the downstream.
And Philippe, I still have a magnum of that shit.
You're talking Philippe Melka?
Philippe Combi.
Philippe Combi. Okay.
They did the downstream project with
Justin Smith, Saxum,
and Sasha Verhang down, and he won.
I got to ding you guys too.
Yeah.
You've been dinging me all day. I got to ding you back.
4 guys with podcasts get together in a hotel room
and interrupt each other the entire time. Perfect.
I think it's been actually very good.
Yeah, I think so too.
But I can't believe you said you couldn't wrap your head around it. That's all.
I couldn't figure out where it went. And but in this world of people being afraid of buying expensive things, or and wanting to reach younger, more diverse customers, we built this new brand, Enrico Valentine. It's my middle name, my brother's middle name. It is also EV, which is our vineyard management company, Enterprise Vineyards, and it's ecological viticulture, which is what we've
an electric vehicle.
We could probably come up with something else.
Just go.
Yeah,
we love the wine.
Thank you.
By the way, you said this is the first time out in the wild. We first had this. You came to my apartment to show me these wine.
Which I love that experience of going to taste at your, you come up the elevator, you walk into this guy's apartment, and it's 10 in the morning, you're like, all right, what's going on?
You see apartment, and I don't think it says the way Francis lives his life.
No, it's a beautiful flat in Jersey City.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, my just for your listeners, I live in Jersey City, which is in North Jersey, and mass transit connected to New York. So if someone's out in New York, it's super easy to say, hey, swing by my place in the morning. You can do it by mass transit. Yep. And then in the afternoon.
Right, it's 5 blocks from the PATH station.
Yeah. So I'm in New Brunswick in the afternoon, which is in the middle of New Jersey. So if people want to meet with me, I give them the option of saying, you meet me at my house in the morning or at the restaurant in the afternoon. So you came to my home and you poured this for me.
It had been bottled for like 2 weeks, by the way.
And I was blown away by it. I was blown away by all your wines, which is why we asked you to do this tasting. But the wine's outrageous. Enrico Valentine, it's tremendous. StageLeftWineShop.com. If you're in New Jersey, you can find this wine.
There is a place to buy it.
You can buy it from you. You can't buy it from me right now. Even I got to get this shit on the website.
Or come to Stage Left Restaurant or Captain Lombardi, have dinner, get a nice bottle of Enrico Valentine. But it really is wonderful. But you have something on your label here that we think is, we spend a lot of time in the restaurant guys talking about and in our lives living is, you talk about it being regenerative. Talk to us about regenerative agriculture in this wine.
Well, baseline is sustainable is not, right? You know, if you're calling what you're doing as sustainable, what we're doing as a planet is not sustainable, right?
That's
sustainable
correct.
Now is just, it's standing downward.
You're going up or
we're
going down?
We're going up or down. So, and this is, it comes from this basic philosophy that if you're putting more back into the soil than you're taking out, what ends up in the bottle and in the glass is going to taste better.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it's just, I mean, it's as simple as that. And then, you know, you also realize that like as farmers, we have the power and the responsibility to farm regeneratively, to take more carbon out of the air and put it into the ground than we're going the other direction.
Which good farming does. I'm gonna plug our show just for a minute. We just posted.
We're in the plug section of that episode, I believe.
We just posted a show with a guy by the name of Peter Bick who did a documentary called Roots So Deep about regenerative cattle farming.
His YouTube channel is Carbon Cowboys.
Oh yeah. No, I've been to a talk that he did.
Super interesting guy.
He's talking about it with cattle farming. Yeah. You're talking about it with viticulture. And we interviewed him on our show, and we're like, there are winemakers that do this with viticulture as well. And it's basically, not only is it good to take carbon out of the atmosphere, but the soil needs that carbon. Right. So it's good to put it back into the soil.
So it makes the shit you're growing better.
Well, you're actually growing topsoil, which, you know, for farming in the United States for the last 50 years, we've been pulling out of the topsoil. We've been reducing the amount
blowing
of topsoil.
it away, washing it away.
And the Central Valley has sunk like 18 inches in the last few years.
Has it really? Yeah. The Central Valley of
California is 18 inches lower in elevation.
18 inches of topsoil. Let's go.
And also aquifer collapse. Pulling water out and
Dude.
Wow. We're doing it wrong.
We're doing it wrong.
We're doing it wrong.
Well, most of them. Some of us are doing it right.
Yes.
And you know,
as a planet on the whole,
as
we're
a
doing
planet,
it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to give you kudos for doing this and for putting the words regenerative on the word regenerative on your label to kind of raise awareness about this. And the thing about it is, what we have always said is, and I think grape farmers, quality grape farmers, are the most important farmers in the world. Here's why. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. A lot of people.
I'll go ahead and ding that one too, real quick.
Well, do the ding. Ready? Yeah. All right. So, here's what I mean. You're not feeding the planet. Look, it's important that people live with vegetables and the wheat and everything that keep us. But grape farmers are on the cutting edge and have always been on the cutting edge of sustainable agriculture, and because grapevines don't move. Number one. Right. So your vine is there for 100 years. So if you make choices today that benefit you for 2 or 3 years, but that cost you 4 or 5 years from now, you'll get the benefit, but you'll also pay the price. Where the soybean farmer will just go plant someplace else. Right. And the other thing is, there is no agricultural product in the world as closely examined as wine grapes, right? Nobody has banana juice that costs $100 a bottle. Nobody ages their banana juice from this different vineyards.
By the way, have you had the carrot eau de vie?
Oh, eau de vie is great.
So we're gonna.
But nobody auctions.
Qualitative.
But nobody auctions banana juice or looks at how the banana juice ages over time or sees how the banana juice from this vineyard is changing relative to that vineyard, and then says, "Wait a second, let's figure out what we're doing agriculturally wrong because we're going to fuck up Napa Valley." And so it's an economic incentive. I'm not saying you guys are the most noble people in the world, but there's an economic incentive to look at more closely at fine wine viticulture than any other aspect of farming.
So basically what Francis is saying, you guys are just selfish.
Yeah. Well, but that's
we're in it for the wine. Let's be real.
And he didn't tell you. The fact he hasn't told you is Stage Left is actually an inch higher than it was when we
But like this, I'm gonna make a huge analogy. But like the space program, you guys figure out shit to how to make more wonderful, expensive wine that then potato farmers use how how to make their land better and make, and not poison the soil and not have to have farmers wear spacesuits to keep themselves insulated from the terrible chemical. When a guy's working the field of your food wearing a spacesuit, right. Don't eat that food. Yeah. Figure some other way out.
You're a wine astronaut. That's what you are.
I've been to space, that's for sure. Longer than Katy Perry, definitely.
We're back to the marijuana.
Marijuana plus. No, but to your point, I think that what I've seen from both my dad and my uncle with Couturi Winery and then, the shift to biodynamics 25 years ago and now into regenerative is wine, because of its cultural prominence, because of that spotlight on it and these treasured bottles, has the opportunity to take these farming methods and put them on a pedestal and put a spotlight on them. Yeah. So that, when my dad and my uncle launched Couturi Winery in 1979, nobody knew what organic meant. Right. And when the Benzigers converted everything to Demeter certified biodynamics in 99, nobody knew what biodynamic meant. And now you can go to Walmart and buy biodynamic lettuce.
Yeah, but and one of the reasons is because the guy who's growing lettuce doesn't have the margin to be able to say, let's experiment with this other kind of agriculture. And if you're selling $20 bottle of wine or $100 bottle of wine, you have the wherewithal to make agricultural experiments.
To find a better way.
The guy growing potatoes.
To look for a better way.
The guy growing potatoes on Long Island simply doesn't have that ability. But if winemakers and viticulturists come up with new ways of doing things, the potato farmer, you don't patent that thing. Farmers share their information. And that's why I think that there's a great social utility to even expensive wine that benefits everybody.
Well, I'm going to take this moment to plug an event that we're doing in August.
Yeah,
Morgan Peterson and I and Katie Buncho and I have teamed up, and we're doing a tasting in San Francisco, August 17th. We're calling it Sorbet, Sonoma Organic Regenerative Biodynamic Educational Tasting. We had to come up with something. And it is only wines from Sonoma Valley and only from vineyards that are farmed, organic, regenerative, or biodynamic. And what we've found in doing this, there's about 13,000 acres of planted vineyard in Sonoma Valley, and probably 2,500 or more acres of Sonoma Valley qualify for this tasting, putting us at like 20% of the appellation, which if you look across the planet, you're hard pressed to find an appellation that has 20% of that kind of, that level of farming. So
I'm sure he can tell you that if you understand economics, that falls right into Pareto's principle, 80-20. So that actually,
80-20.
It actually makes sense.
Right, I'm going to have to go back to Econ 10, whatever.
20% of the people doing almost all the work, exactly. And 80% of the people,
Yep.
Totally.
Yep. That's totally tracks.
Living off the fat of the land.
Totally tracks.
But the point is so that we can. Yes, go ahead.
There's going to be lectures. There's going to be discussions.
This is just walk around tasting first time out of the gate. Okay. The goal is to grow it and no panel. I love a panel. I love a panel. I love to talk on a panel, moderate a panel. I love a panel. I push.
You can't take 45 minutes for a panel.
I push for a panel.
Your boy moderate it.
I push for a panel. You got MTPMW there. You defer when he says defer. Love you, Morgan.
Hey, Morgan.
I've known Morgan since I was dinging days.
And Joel, bringing back Ravenswood, so much good stuff. How do you guys feel about that? Ravenswood was the shit in the 90s, right?
Okay. I gotta tell you a story about Ravenswood. Kevin Zerelli was my mentor in the wine world. Wait,
now he's got to break shit. Because we're all here because it's Kevin Zerelli.
We're all exactly. So Kevin Zerelli was cellar master at Windows in the World. I was working at a restaurant called the Frog and the Peach, where he eventually worked, and we worked together for the last 3 years before he opened our own place. It's 1987, and I took this class with a mutual friend of ours, a guy named Scott Farrar. Big shout out to Scott in South Carolina. He was the manager of the place, and he said, you got to take Kevin Zerelli's course if you want to learn about wine. And I'm, it's a new field then. The world of wine was 1/3 as big as it is today. And I took Kevin's class, and I went up to him in my one suit, and I was like, oh, my friend is Scott Farrar, and hello. And I was 24 years old.
Yeah, probably 23 years.
And Kevin was like, oh, well, you're a friend of Scott's. You must be an asshole. We were friends immediately, right? And so he would always call me, a class of 300 people at Windows in the World. And I spoke to him after every class, and he said, and he took me under his wing. And he where did I start with this discussion? Where did I come from with this? Where were we?
Ravenswood.
Ravenswood.
Yeah.
So Kevin sent me with letters of introduction to California. He said, you got to go there now. If you want to learn about one, you got to go. And then eventually did the same thing in Europe. But I go to California and I've got introduction to.
And this is 1987. There's no email.
No.
Right, there's no email.
There's fax machines, but they're expensive.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah, he's got a letter.
So he goes and he sends me to Ravenswood. And it's a small winery back then. It was before they sold. It was tiny, and there
was it up on Garricky though? Or?
Yeah, and it's like at the bend in the road, and so I go in and I meet Joel and he's like, oh, you're a friend of Kevin's, okay, whatever. And he doesn't stop for a moment. He's working in the winery or whatever, and he says, you want to punch down the cap? And I'm like, punch down the sure. He's like, okay. So you go up and I'm on top of this open top thing, right?
Like redwood fermenter.
Wood fermenter, open top wood fermenter. And he's like, here's a ladder. I'm like, ladder, okay. I'll go up the ladder. And I go up the ladder. He's like, now crawl out between these two planks. He has a cross. And he gives me a 2x4. And he's like, so you punch down the cap, and I'm punching. So the cap is the crust that forms on the top of the winery. And you basically punch it down to break it so it doesn't form.
They may not.
I'm telling you.
No, he's been. Thank you.
You guys know.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
So that I figure that you know. But tell me, it's big open top wood fermenter, and I got a 2x4, and I'm punching down the cap. And I'm sure he doesn't remember. I saw him years later. I didn't remember. And I'm punching down the cap, and he says, so a crust of the skins and stuff forms on the top that if you leave it, it'll form a hard crust, and then it will seal in all the heat and all the CO2 and ruin the wine. So you got to punch it down and break it up and macerate that stuff back in. I'm punching it down, and he says, hey, Francis, he's known me for 15 minutes. He's like, just be careful up there, because, the number one source of fatalities in wineries is when people are overwhelmed by CO2 when they're punching down the cap. So if you begin to feel lightheaded, let me know. I'm like, okay.
I was lightheaded when I got here.
Anyway, that was informative. I didn't know it was so dangerous to make wine, but it was.
We've fixed many of those dangers. Threats plunged in the last 40 years. Not all of them, but some of them.
About a minute later, Francis is like, I'm done.
Where's the tasting wine part? That's what I came for. That was amazing.
Right on. Shout out to Joel.
Shout out to Joel.
It's like 5:55. I don't know what kind.
Yeah, we got to go do
it. We got to do a wine tasting.
So, before, let's do some quick wrap up real quick. We'll ask both of you, what are you most excited about for the future?
Wow. Jetpacks.
We should have had those shit already, man.
You're asking me?
No.
Yeah. You go first, Mark.
I did.
He wants jetpacks. Fair enough.
I don't know. I'm excited for when the dust settles. I really am. We've been around for 32 and a half years, almost 33 years. Another 2 months will be 33 years. The crash of 2008. September 11th, COVID, and
those are things.
We built a
big fucking.
There were things.
We only have 225 seat restaurants, but we're part of this community, and there's a huge shout out to New Brunswick, and New Brunswick's kind of the downtown of all the surrounding towns as well. It's a little rough right now, and but we're here, and our friends still come to the restaurant. We're still an important part of people's lives, and I'm looking forward to everybody, to us getting to a point where it's a little calm again and people have less stress. But you know what? We're here for when you have stress. We're here for when you don't have stress. And I don't know. I'm looking forward to continuing to see the rise of New Brunswick and the restaurants that we have. Oh, and the restaurant guys. We're super excited at how quickly the restaurant guys are growing, and that's amazing to us.
So real answer to your question. I don't spend a ton of time thinking about when will my life be great again.
Okay, that's great. Yeah,
I'm super fortunate guy. He's a super fortunate guy. I do a job that I love. I go to work every day in a place that I love. I just did the math because, like you already told your stats major, we have each spent over 100,000 hours in that building across the street.
Wow.
I still love going to work every day. When I'm driving to work, I'm thinking about, what am I doing today? What fun thing is on and because that's our spot, right? When we're planning wine tastings and things like that, we plan things, to be honest, that are fun for us.
Yeah.
Right. So the mind space is, if it's something we want to do, it's something they'll want to do.
Yeah.
And so that's the beginning of it. But listen, he could have made more money. We could have owned 25 restaurants around the state or around the country. I love being in my space, knowing the names of 80% of the people who walk in the door, introducing new people to what we do and how we do it. I love it. I have a great life. I don't need to look forward. I get to enjoy what I'm doing right now.
Well, and to be honest, we get to be in so many different communities.
You know what I'm looking forward to? Having the last word.
Never
sometimes.
Never gonna happen. What was it you called me that one time? Is it Yak Yaron? Is that what you call it?
Yak Yaron.
That's what I'm a Yak Yaron. That's the only Italian I know. But honestly, I'm going to throw this back on you guys. The podcast is really important to us. Yeah, we want to have it be successful. We love that we're on stage in front of hundreds of people and they'll pay to come see us and how the businesses interact. But honestly, we get to have conversations like this with people like you. Yeah. And this is your podcast, and thanks for having us on it. But because of the restaurant business, we got to meet you. Because of time, we get to do this together. Because we got invited on your podcast. This is awesome. What kind of better? This is our life. This is the life we were meant to have.
Wine and food people are fun.
Yeah.
We're fun.
Yeah.
I've been saying this thing lately since we were at the DTC conference, and it occurred to me, DTC is obviously our business as much as we love doing wholesale and working
DTC?
with direct to consumer.
Oh,
yeah, which is
I'm against that.
Yeah, of course.
And
all the
This
distributors.
podcast just ended.
Thank you very much for joining us.
But it's occurred to me lately, and I think this is the business that you guys are in too. It's not direct to consumer; it's direct to community.
Yeah.
And being a part of something that helps build a community and is a part of the community, like your restaurants are, and like the podcast is, that becomes a community that's nationwide and global. So that's if I'm thinking about it, it's how we continue to do that. DT community.
I think that's a great thing nationwide, and I think you also, and I know you're supporting us in getting to consumers as well. And we talk about this a lot with people like George Henry and all these other folks that we deal with.
I know George Henry.
Right?
On a sneak tip.
But what do we bring as retailers and restaurateurs to? We have George Henry come in for dinner. We have you come in for dinner. Obviously, what I don't want to do this dinner so people buy direct from you for the next 10 years. I want to introduce people to you so they buy through me. And what generally winds up happening is we are able to deliver something without it being sent in the mail for basically the same price that they bought from you.
Right.
So when you have somebody like us in the community that's an advocate, I just want to be part of that community. I want to add to that community. And I think that, when you're in the middle of Minnesota and there's nobody around you that can represent your wines, you don't have the benefit of us. But I hope that we have a value add to the people who want to buy wines directly from you if they're in New Jersey, if they're around us. And I get it all can work together.
It's definitely a symbiotic thing, 100%.
Yeah.
That's why, we could survive only doing DTC,
right?
But it's not as exciting. It's not as fun. Sure. It's not as interesting to you get out here and come and meet new people. And
you're deadheads. You need people,
right? We need people, and that's the original DTC band, right? It was direct to the community. It was not about selling records, and it was about getting the people together. So anytime that I can do that's what I love to come out and do a tasting like that. Anytime you get the community together, you're doing the job.
Yep.
So we've been doing some plugs, but guys, one more time before we go, tell people where they can find you, how they can be a part of what you're doing.
Restaurants in New Brunswick, New Jersey, if you're going to be in town, stageleft.com or Catherine Lombardi with a C.com. The podcast, please check us out at restaurantguyspodcast.com. You can find us at any podcatcher thereabouts. Come visit us anytime. Ask for Mark and Francis. We're really on the floor of our restaurants most nights. And if we're not on the floor, we might be in the other restaurant or down in the office or in the shop, but we're usually around. And if you've heard of us from this podcast, we'd actually love to speak to you in person.
Sam, what do you want to say?
I want to give Mark the last word and have that great intro that he said before we started recording, the restaurant guy's intro as the closer for this.
Okay, so then I'll do my thing and we'll hand over to Mark. So for all the listeners, make sure you check out the show notes for this episode. I'll put links to their podcast and links to 16600 and links to the Winemakers Pod, as I always do. But we're going to let this one in with some real podcasters, not some amateurs. Oh, geez. Here you go, Mark. Bring us home.
Gotcha.
Oh, he got his own mic.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you. We are the Restaurant Guys. I'm Mark Pascal, and this is Francis Schott. Together, we own Stage Left and Captain Lombardi restaurants in New Brunswick, New Jersey. We're here to bring you the inside track on food, wine, and the finer things in life.
That's great. We're out.
We're out.